Afternoon, all.
Afternoon.
Hiya.
Afternoon.
Afternoon.
We're joined today, thank you all. We're joined today by David, Morwenna, Teri, Norman, and Dilan. Thanks and welcome all. Today it is a discussion and a bit of a demo, but it is mainly a discussion around, why Power BI isn't Excel. The topic keeps on coming up over and over again. We had a podcast on this some time ago, but people will always compare Excel with Power BI and other data visualization or data analytics tools as well. And we see it, I say we, our team and others, we see it constantly from organizations or client asking for, we've got this Excel report or Excel file. Can you replicate it? There are reasons why we should or we shouldn't, and there are other reasons as well that you may not want to. There may be other ways, better ways to do that. And I know we've all discussed it internally quite a few times, but share your experience, David.
Yeah, sometimes you'll get a request where it's a customer want to replicate some data that's extremely tabular, and they want all the rows and fields to line up. I think if you're, and particularly from a financial reporting perspective, but with that, you're missing out on a lot of the rich visualizations and the interactivity that Power BI provides. And I think you're limiting yourself to kind of the full functionality of what Power BI can really bring. And also in terms of that, it's never going to look exactly the same as how you have it in Excel. If you want to do financial modeling, forecasting, etc., and you want real flexibility for that, then Excel is fine. But I think if you just want to replicate that into a Power BI report, it's much better to go down the route of seeing how you can really get the value out of the rich visualizations and interactivity and cross-filtering that Power BI really offers. I don't know whether anyone else has got any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I was just saying, you could make something from Excel onto Power BI and it could be good, but I think the question you've got to ask yourself is, could it be better? Because Power BI has a lot of features that aren't afforded to Excel. There's a lot of AI support that you can use on Power BI. And just like David mentioned earlier, the interactive features allows users, when using reports on Power BI, to interact freely with the report and changing graphs using slicers and different features as you go along. So I feel like there's a lot more options you can use for Power BI, so you could always potentially make it better.
But people, at Excel, people use it for different things as well. People will use Excel to quickly input data, or as a data storage, data repository, and then quickly it may actually be the data repository, and then visualize on top of it, add filters, add formulas to it. They use it for a bit of pretty much everything, right? Because one of the common things go on, Morwenna.
Sorry, I was saying there is the situation where if they've got an Excel sheet, it's got lots of worksheets, and you said using things like the filtering options, the slicer options on Power BI, you can effectively have one page of your report and filter it, rather than having to sort of go through and find the right worksheet as you do on Excel. So it can have all that information in there, but you can access it a lot easier.
Because you can definitely do a lot with Excel.
You definitely can do, but it's like, should you? If you can use it as both a repository and a place to modify the data, you shouldn't really always just you won't have one source of the truth necessarily, because if you're sharing it on SharePoint, you could have then 10 different versions of 10 different people having downloaded it, and 10 different people having changed the formulas
made changes
without any communication. With Power BI, you have one model potentially that you then connect all of your reports to.
And everybody
that is
can
really
collaborate on that, can't they? On in the workspace, so everybody can make the changes that they do need. But you still all have just one data source.
absolutely, yeah.
You're all looking at the same.
We had an example of this. We had a client recently, and we were doing the discovery phase and talking to them, and we were speaking to all the different departments. And the issue is, one department would have their figures as their truth, but another department would actually do other things to those figures. And so they would, like, for example, not include things or include things, and then they would have that as their truth. And in conclusion, you would then have these two different things of the truth where they just manipulate the figures and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
So I think that is an issue with having Excel,
I
in
remember
that everyone.
Terry. They had the same names, right, for the metrics, but they had different formulas for the metrics.
Yes,
right?
yeah. You can standardize with Power BI. You can standardize what your measures are, so everybody within the business is using the same terms.
But that's the other. Oh yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, but I mean, I was just going to say you've got much greater control over who can actually see the data at source and who can actually potentially make changes to that.
Yes.
So then, like you say, around the single source of the truth, people are only ever accessing the same data, and they can't actually. It's much easier to restrict who's then doing anything with that data at source, which increases the consistency. And then you've also got features around further adding security around dynamic row level security, so you can then make sure users are only seeing data potentially that you want them to see. In Excel, it's much more difficult, if not impossible, to do that. So yeah, sorry, Terry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the other reason why Power BI has a benefit over Excel is that in Excel anyone can edit the information and do what they want, whereas Power BI only reads the information, so there isn't a lot you can do with it to manipulate the figures. That is the truth, and that's that kind of thing. So you can't change it to do whatever you want it to do. So that is one big difference between Excel and Power BI, is that Excel you can read the data and you can write on it, but Power BI you can only read it. You can't write back. Because
sometimes in Excel, I had a client where their data in Excel, because you can change a cell by accident, and that can sort of change everything, and then you have to try and find where that error was. Whereas Power BI, you can't make those changes just by unless you actually go back to the beginning. But in Excel, you can accidentally make a change to a cell, and that will completely distort your report.
We had a similar
read-only option.
We had a similar one where the numbers, the column had a formula applied. However, a few particular cells were overwritten. And I think it was probably just to make the numbers look good, or what they wanted to present to the business, and they would overwrite them. Now, if they're going to share, the Excel file, and they continue to share it every single time, you have to remember to do that. So when we tried and to take a look, and we looked at the numbers in Power BI, they wouldn't quite match those numbers, and it was only through looking at Excel to see they'd overwritten them and the formula wasn't applied. But when you actually applied formulas, the numbers were correct in Power BI. So there is that element of, and we've all probably seen it multiple times, there is an element of teams kind of analyzing, but also querying the data and kind of modifying or changing things within the data. So they'd export transactions into Excel, but then change numbers to show them, because they factored something. And it's not just in a case of they just changed number, but they've factored something else into it. Oh, that should be this because of this rate was applied. So there's a lot of business information, but that's, again, it's with individuals, that business information, and then they can easily apply it. And then they share it. Yeah, so fine, it looks good, but it's difficult.
Going on with what you just said as well, I guess if you're doing manual manipulations and things like that within Excel, there is a level of human error that can occur. Whereas if you're using it just as a data repository and then pulling it into Power BI, where you're using, for example, DAX and calculated columns, there is a lot less chance of error because you're taking away the human side of it and you're not doing it yourself. Once you've kind of got it down and correct and you're refreshing it, you don't have to kind of worry about it anymore. So I guess that's another big thing is Excel, there is chance for human error, whereas Power BI, not so much.
Because like you say, there's with Excel, you'd have more of a, if you're trying to bring in data at a certain frequency, there'd be more of a manual interaction, even if you were using Power Query within Excel. Whereas through Power BI, when you publish reports to the Power BI service, you have, once that's all finalized and you're happy with the report, you can schedule the refresh. So then it's bringing in the data, obviously depending on licensing at the frequency that you want, or you can manually refresh, but it's all much simpler. And I think it's also the speed at which you can get insight from both tools, because and it depends kind of what you're really looking for. But for example, with Power BI, you can create a drill through page. So if you were to right click on a chart, you could then create a page that would be launched automatically, filtered down with additional insight on top of what the metric you were looking at. Or you can have tooltips that appear with additional insight. I know, Teri, you've done quite a lot around custom tooltips for projects you've worked on. And I think, and I mean, with Power BI, it's once you've got that standardized data set in the form that you want it, then you can be ready to build out this report that has a single source of truth. I mean, if you're at a different stage in the journey, then maybe Excel, if you want a bit more flexibility to enter data, to do a bit more sort of, I guess, fiddling around with different financial models, forecasting, etc., and you want all the flexibility of being able to enter data wherever, then yes, Excel provides all of that, and Power BI wouldn't. But as we've been discussing,
Excel,
there's a lot more in Power BI that could be of value once the data's at kind of that more standardized stage.
Excel 100% has its place. We had a client that we spoke to recently where when they initially started, they used Excel, but the problem is now the business has started growing. It just has meant there's a lot of manual work, and so it means that there's certain members of staff who are just copy and pasting information between one Excel to another Excel to make all these different reports. So there is a place for Excel. It just, unfortunately, it just doesn't seem time or money efficient when you start to have a grown business, because if you think of these employees that are copy and pasting information between different Excels, where if you had that just as a source and Power BI was refreshing, they could then be doing something more beneficial with their time.
It's true. And I mean, Dylan, you mentioned a really good point earlier about I think it was around the number of connectors that you've got within Power BI. So you may be able to connect directly into the source using Power BI, whereas for an Excel format, you may be having to dump something out to Excel first and then do whatever with it. Whereas Power BI offers much more of a direct interaction with the source data via the number of connectors that you've got available. So.
There was one client that we went to see who had each department had its own team working on their own Excel spreadsheets, and sort of almost like once a week, the C-suite would want a sort of combination of data from the different departments, and each department was working on its own Excel spreadsheet. Quite often they were sort of requiring the same information, but they had different teams all doing it together. Whereas in Power BI, if it's all in the workspace and it's all connected up, it's a lot easier to get the information from the different departments together in one report, rather than sort of teams of people actually replicating the work, or a lot of the work, to produce their part of the report.
So Power BI, data analytics tool, great for visualization, lots of connectors, central models, like a data repository. and can be shared. And yes, you can, I'd say, a lot of the times you can probably trust the data. Okay, yeah, because it's verified, you've worked on it, etc. So it's great for that, and we know that. It means it has great interaction, great visualizations. Excel can do a lot of that, because it still has some great visualizations. You can use it as a data repository. You can share it, but as soon as you kind of share it in the data within Excel, it may not be the central single repository. But we also know that Power BI, Excel is great if you had lots and lots of data and you wanted to scroll down. And yes, you can do that within Power BI, with paginated reports. But if you wanted things like fixed formatting and you always wanted everything in a certain column, then it's paginated reports, right? Because Power BI, data analytics, visualization tool. But what if you had a client and they were adamant to say, and they said, well, we've got these Excel reports. Can you just create them in Power BI, please? And it's going to be difficult to create them in Power BI. How do you convince them? What do you say? You could say something like my coffee mug.
Yeah. What does that say? You're having a giraffe? Is that...
Yeah.
Yeah. But how do you convince them? What do you do?
Do you quickly prototype something
Yes,
to
do it,
show
do
the
it.
benefits of Power BI versus what they were intending? And if they wanted to see something in a tabular version, then you have a summary page where you have the different comparisons really quickly for them to look at between different categories or whatever, or different dates, and then they drill through to the tabular information, where they then see pretty much the replica of the Excel. At that
They
point.
don't know what they've never had. That's the problem.
You have to
Yeah,
show them, I
that's a
think,
good
don't you?
point.
Because I think you need to give them a demo, because if they're so used to Excel, that's why they want the Excel sheet replicated, because that's what they're used to. But if you actually show them how easy it is to see that same information, I think they get it. But a lot of it is it's habit. An Excel user who's got, knows how to use Excel really quickly on their report. But I had a client, and they had their Excel spreadsheet was just column after column after column, and the user would whiz right to the end because they were used to it. But if on Power BI you just you could just find the column, anybody could find the column, whereas if on the Excel sheet you had to you'd have to be familiar with that particular spreadsheet to know where to find the information you wanted.
You want to do a demo, Teri?
Yes, I don't know if you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Oh, that's because I haven't clicked it. Halfway there. There we go. Right. Now can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Well, there's something loading.
Yes.
There
Oh,
you
it's loading.
go.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay.
It takes a few seconds, but
So as an example, I did get Norman to kind of replicate and kind of tweak an example of a Excel report. So this one is, for example, it's just like a spend tracker for the year for all the different categories, and it just has like a load of measures and then a graph at the bottom. So the kind of thing that you'd have, and then you would kind of imagine like loads of different pages for like just employee salaries and visuals and things like that for the year, and kind of, so it's just kind of like a base start of an example of an Excel report. And between us, we kind of turned it into a Power BI report just to kind of show how, okay, this is what it could look like as Excel, or you could have it as Power BI, like this, for example. So you could have it like this as an overview. You could switch it down by the category. So you could say, I only want to see that one. So that already could take off several different pages with going, okay, I just want to see that one category and what the costs were this month and last year. So, and even just breaking it down by like months, for example. So that's like kind of one area. And then then thinking about it, you could then have like a bit of a deep dive into those categories. So it'd be quite easy. So you could do like your drill through to it. Just for a quick example, I did a salary breakdown, and these are just made up names. And you could then look at and say, okay, well, why are my salaries high? And so quite quickly, from using like insights within Power BI, you could say, okay, cool, Shailan and Teri we've spent the most of salary on them. Are they actually worth it? So you could click on Shailan, you could say, okay, well, that's how much we're paying him, this is how much hours he worked. He's not really working very much down here, and we still paid him the same, but he's kind of had some spikes.
It's quite reflective, actually.
So it's like here, Dave is getting a solid amount. He's been doing a lot of hours, then had a bit of a drop. So it's very dynamic, and it's so easy just to be able to click through.
What about
These
Norman
made up
and
ones.
Dylan?
Oh, Norman was a bit of a subcontractor. He came along. He did a lot of hours there. Still only got paid that amount. So
I'm seeing a very strong positive correlation in my work, though.
yes, exactly. So it's useful to see, because then you can say, okay, well, our salaries are high. Is it actually worth it? Are these people worth it? And it's just like very quick and easy to click between it, and it's just very dynamic. And I just feel within Excel, it would take you so much time just to find out, okay, this one person, I want to see this one person, what hours they worked, how much we've been paying them, like what, and like all that kind of thing. I just think it's just Power BI is just, it has its place, and it's just so useful. But yeah,
it works very quickly, doesn't it?
Yeah. So
very, very simply.
Like this person, for example, probably needs a speaking to for the hours they're working for their wage. So, so yeah, it's just I've had so many clients that they like it because they can see quickly where issues are. So we've had it where there was a client we had, and they would never get the information for a machine when it was down. They would have to wait like 24 hours to find out. But because we'd connected up the information, they would find out like within the day that the machine was broken and needed looking at. So I just love Power BI. I just think it's so useful compared to Excel. It's prettier as well, I would say.
That is good. I like it. Nicely.
Yeah, very good.
Nice and colourful.
And very easy to as you said, talking about it looking pretty, it's very easy to copy formatting, and
yes,
it's very easy to do that.
It's very easy to understand what is what. Like the card visuals you're using at the top are very clear and concise. And then again, the interactivity when you're clicking on each of those names and the way it formats and changes all the different visuals on the page is very useful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you also get the flexibility of going, well, you can cross-filter like you've got them all connected at the moment, but you can also go, well, there are certain things that I do want to cross-filter when I select a visual, but not others. So you've also got that kind of, there is quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how you want the report to be affected when you were to select certain visuals, etc.
Yeah. Like these cards do not change when I click any of this. They still will stay the same. Whereas like if you had this, okay, you've got employee salaries, but then you'd have another page for it, and then you'd have to, like, for example, here, this is just a list of all of it, and then you'd have to kind of filter through. And I just feel like visually it'd be harder to understand where like the dips and everything are from hours worked, whereas compared to here, it's quite visual, it's easy to see. You can still get the actual information if you want it. You can hover on it and get the actual hours worked.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's just visually more appealing to the eye.
Looks good. And there are certain things. There are certain things that if certainly that Power BI is not, Excel's probably better to use for in certain scenarios. You get lots and lots of data and lots of scrolling down. Yes, you can use paginated reports or you can use Power BI. But there are certain scenarios where just use Excel. Yeah, don't try and replicate it in Power BI. Just use Excel for that. Yeah. But maybe think about a central data warehouse or central repository, and then use Excel.
Yeah.
Yeah, Excel definitely has its place, and there are times where it just shouldn't be replicated in Power BI. It should be tweaked and improved. But they're just not the same. They are completely different applications.
I mean, one of the things with Power BI though is you can visualize it a lot easier on mobile devices. You know, trying to look at an Excel report on a mobile device is you know, it's all too small, whereas you can adapt your report on Power BI.
Unless you have a 15-inch mobile device.
Mm.
iPad. Then it kind of defeats the point then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, it's true. It is, yeah. It renders it, doesn't it, within the Power BI app. So, yeah, and that's good. Excellent. It was a good demo, by the way. Anything else from anyone else?
I think just the main things to remember, if you remembered like one snapshot from this, is Power BI is mainly an analytics tool, while Excel is multifaceted and can do several different things.
Yeah.
And some things you shouldn't necessarily do. No, obviously. And other things are better placed with Power BI.
Yeah, exactly.
They are not the same. They are different. They complement each other, but they are not the same.
So Power BI is not Excel.
Yeah, Power BI was never meant to replace it.
No.
It was a building upon an enhancement of some of the tools that already existed.
Yeah, because the first iterations were actually within Excel. So Power Query, Power View, Power Map, they were within Excel. And it was after that, Microsoft decided to create the product after the acquisition of ProClarity. But after that, decided to actually create their own product called Power BI. And ground up, they did use a lot of the functionality from ProClarity, used a lot of the querying they did within Excel, but then created that product, which is Power BI. And now it's a great product. Obviously, we're going to say that it's a great product, but it is leading. Where other competitive products, likes of Tableau, were leading that Magic Quadrant for a number of years. And it was quite a few years ago that Power BI overtook. Yeah. Good stuff. Anything else?
No, I think that's
don't think so.
That's good. Thanks, everyone, by the way. Hope you
It was
enjoyed
great to be back on here again, Shailan, with you. Lovely
Yes.
time, as always.
Cheers. And with that, thanks all. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.